So why should small businesses care? There's a couple major reasons. Depending on the business, there's a lot. So depending on your audience and your context, but these ones that we're going to talk through are pretty applicable regardless of your environment. So there's a larger audience reach is one of the benefits. We think of the disabled community as kind of a smaller piece of the pie than it actually is in reality. The CDC defines or states that 28.7% of US adults live with a disability. And this is based on the latest data. And then globally, 1.3 billion people experience significant disabilities, and that's per the WHO. The total amount of disposable income on an annual basis for the global disability community is $13 trillion. So this is not an insignificant amount to consider when it comes to how are we making sure that our digital doors to our business are open so that we can do business with this demographic and make sure that our products support them adequately. Most businesses overlook that this data doesn't account for temporary impairments or situational impairments. So a lot of this data is only around what are permanent disabilities. And if we go to this next slide, Microsoft has this really helpful piece of their inclusive design toolkit. There's this chart here on the right that as we go across the rows, it details different types of disabilities. And then going down in the columns, it talks about whether those are permanent, temporary, or situational disabilities. And the thought being here is that as we solve for the more permanent disabilities and create solutions for how to create access to our content for those, it has a downstream effect to making our sites easier to use for people that have the temporary and situational impairments as well. So if we just take a cross section of this with the touch example, someone that might only have one arm is obviously going to be impaired in the way that they're able to interact with your site, whether that's they only have one hand to use on a phone, or they might not be able to use a mouse. These are ways that would inhibit them from using your site or anything in the digital world in a way that we would typically think is a given. The same applies to somebody that may have just broken their arm and their arm's in a sling or a cast, and then situationally, like a new parent that might be holding a child and only have one hand as an access to navigate digital content. So you can start to see how this has these downstream effects that make it easier for the user experience across your site to be enhanced, to be improved, so that users that might not even consider themselves having a disability have a better experience when using your website. And that's really important, as we'll see here. The second thing is improved search engine optimization. There's a really tight bond between accessibility improvements and search engine optimization. And the reason for this is because the underlying HTML that underpins your content and your site helps search engines be able to scan your content in much the same way that assistive technology like screen readers can scan your content. So as we make better improvements to the underlying HTML, that helps search engine optimization as well as people using assistive technology. Some examples of this are alternative text on images. So you might get deranked in SEO if you have a lot of images that don't have alt text. It's also a critical piece of accessibility to make sure that we're describing images accurately. Same goes for transcripts and captions for things like video and audio content. Having those available makes it possible to scan the contents of those files so that they can be returned as there's relevant keywords searched for. And then we talked about user experience in that last slide. That comes into play here as well, because ultimately, if a user is less frustrated in using your landing page or your product page, there's less of a chance that they're going to bounce quickly, maybe go check out your competitor's website or just bail on the effort altogether. And so by improving those things that make it possible or easier for them to use your site, you're reducing the bounce rate overall, which things like Google and search engine optimization in general care about quite a bit, is reducing that bounce rate. Another one is enhanced brand reputation, and this is more and more an important piece. Inclusive websites show that your business cares. It shows that you have a level of professionalism and a commitment to all of your users or customers. It's cited that 75% of customers say that a brand's diversity and inclusion reputation influences their purchasing decisions, that's a massive cross-section of customers. In a crowded marketplace, demonstrating a genuine care for your users can be a meaningful differentiator. So if your competitors aren't putting work into making sure that they're compliant, making sure that they have this accessibility support in place, that can really make you stand out as a customer might give up on using their product and come and see that yours is easier to use for them. And then the obvious reason that we're all here today is the reduced legal risk as well. So we'll jump into this in quite a bit of detail here in the next section, but just to give an overview, web accessibility lawsuits continue to surge across the US, and that trend is not showing any signs of slowing down in 2025. So we'll cover that, like I said, in a little bit. Accessibility works best as a proactive shield against legal risk and not reactive damage control. This is for a couple reasons. So the first one being that you become less of a target if it's seen that you are making efforts towards accessibility. If someone comes to your site, tries to scan it with like an automated tool, maybe if it's a plaintiff law firm, if you have efforts that are clearly in place to make accessibility improvements, you're not going to be as easy of a target for their lawsuit. And then the reactive piece of it, it can be quite a bit more expensive to try to solve issues and patch in fixes for accessibility, as opposed to building this into your site proactively and not being under the gun to try to make these fixes quickly or as a retroactive fix. The other piece here is that lawsuits aren't just targeting big brands. A lot of the headlines that we'd seen over the past 10 years or so, a lot of the big names were in there, like Target, CVS, Winn-Dixie, Domino's. These are big companies, but the data shows that over 60% of lawsuits are targeting small businesses, which is defined as less than 25 million in revenue. So that's a little bit down actually from 2024, which I think was closer to 70%, but it's still a very significant portion. And then quickly, some reasons that website owners don't handle accessibility. This is kind of what are the top excuses that we typically see. There's a lack of awareness, and this is a totally genuine one. There's just a lot of business owners that don't realize that this is an area that they need to have a solution for. And so it can be quite common for them to be caught unaware of the need for this. There is a perceived cost and complexity, and this is true with anything that has the word compliance attached to it, is that this is going to require a massive full site audit and then fixes for that. That's going to have a really big price tag attached to it, which can be true, but myself and other accessibility specialists have tried to find ways to do cross sections of testing high value pages to make sure that you're getting a lot of return for a smaller investment that still is able to move the needle in accessibility compliance. Another reason is that they might not have faced legal pressure yet. So this is kind of the roll the dice approach of saying we may not have received a demand letter, or our users aren't complaining about having issues with accessibility support. And so we're going to just wait and see what happens, which is just not a very smart position. And then the last one is DIY website limitations. So if you're using a tool like a page builder like Squarespace, Wix, WordPress themes, sometimes you can be locked in with those tools where you might know that there's an accessibility fix that needs to be made, but you might not have the admin tools or controls to do that. And so then you're left at the whim of that tool or that plugin and having to reach out to their support team and get that logged as a support ticket, as opposed to having the access and the ability to fix that directly.